Hey everyone, we're going to get started here. It is 3:03. My name is Phil Clowater. I'm an account executive with CDW Canada on the enterprise sales team. Just want to thank everyone for joining us this Monday afternoon to learn more about CDW's program for AWS WorkSpaces. Any questions can be directed to the Q&A chat section in WebEx, and I will be going through the questions with the team at the end of the presentation, so please ask questions throughout the presentation or at the end of the presentation, and we will get to them eventually. With that, I would like to introduce Larissa Circo, our cloud practice lead for the East, and John Lushbeth, a cloud architect with CDW Canada.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it. Just going to start off with us as CDW. We are here to support you in this current state that we're all in, trying to navigate through. And so feel free to reach out to us about this or anything else that you might need in the current environment that we're in. I'm actually part of the services organization, and so that is part of Legacy Scalar. We were acquired last year and have been fully integrated as of January this year, and happy to be part of the broader CDW team. In terms of kind of what we're known for, I know traditionally it's been traditional hardware and software, but with the acquisition of Scalar, we have a fairly large professional services practice that we've integrated with a number of expertise in various areas like cloud for myself, data center, and security, as well as others. And so obviously, with CDW being a global organization here to support you, quite a large billion-dollar business, here to scale with your business as well. With the acquisition of Scalar, we've added a number of offices, and we basically have an office wherever there's a hockey team, plus a few other offices. Myself and the others on the call are actually out of the Toronto office. Obviously, we're actually all working from home at this point in time. And so everybody's working remotely with the current state that everything's in. But once we get back to get back to normal businesses, we're supporting you across the country. And so I'm just going to go into an overview of the AWS WorkSpace production accelerator we have. And I'm going to start with a little bit of why cloud VDI. And so traditionally, VDI is known as a fairly substantial solution that you put on premises with having to calculate all of your hardware requirements and supporting your end users, being concerned about latency for those end users, and really creating a capacity that scales with that. And so over calculating how much capacity you might have on-prem as part of that. With a cloud option, you actually get more of a scalable solution. You can provision what you actually need for your users. You can also provision where you might have those users. So whether that is remote users in Europe or Asia, you can set up the services anywhere and closer to your end employees to help support them. And right now, obviously, with having to enable remote employee work, this is actually a really great solution because it gets you up, set up in a matter of seconds, basically, versus a traditional setup where you'd have to procure, install, set up, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we look at why AWS WorkSpaces, we look at a few key areas. And so I talked about setting up a solution in terms of setting it up quickly. And so there's a simplicity to the actual setup there. We can scale up your service. So things such as leveraging the various data centers is an option versus an on-prem solution, you might not have that option to set up users kind of in a global capacity efficiently. You can look at reducing your costs when you can look at things like smart shutdown as an example. So not using things like compute when your users are not logged in. And so having some cost savings with that. And so basically with cloud, as you know, you have consume, pay for what you consume type model, which is a huge cost benefit when you're looking at a cloud space. John, is there any other key points that you want to add from a workspace perspective here?
I would just note that the way workspaces operate, they're only online/running when a user is actually logged into them. So if a user logs out, they actually go into a standby mode where you're only paying for disk. So beyond the cost efficiency of only using workspaces, given a quantity of users, and you can scale them up and down, you can also turn workspaces on and off during work hours so that it saves cost during its downtime.
Thank you. So CDW has a partnership actually with AWS. We are a consulting partner. We're actually only one of 3 MSP partners within Canada as well. So it allows us to have extra support with the AWS team that we leverage for customers. We also have a bunch of certified folks, including John, as well as others on our team, all certified, cloud certified with AWS, as well as other technologies that we support as a cloud team. We've also created this pre-canned kind of production accelerator that I'm going to walk through in just a little bit, but I'm going to start with actually some prerequisites that you should consider from when we're talking about workspaces. The first is setting up an AWS account. So you can do that either with your credit card or we can resell it to you if that's something that you choose to do. And I'm going to actually tag John in to talk about the kind of technical side.
Sure. So in terms of AWS, the actual workspaces prerequisites are pretty slim. All you really need to have is an AWS account. If you don't have one, you can create one. Some sort of single sign-on solution. So Microsoft Active Directory or Okta, or insert your single sign-on solution partner here. And then just a licensing check if you'd like to bring in your own Windows 10 licenses.
Yeah, so from a licensing standpoint, we can help support a review of that if you like. We are a Microsoft partner, and so there are some requirements from a Windows licensing if that's your choice of operating system. And so when we look at the actual program that we have in place, it's a 3-day program that we've got set up. It's about $11K, I think just a bit over that in terms of cost for our services. That doesn't include the consumption portion for AWS, so just make a note of that. We'll configure up to 10 users. And then go through a few phases. Actually, John, why don't you go through the 3 phases that we have within the production accelerator?
Absolutely. So this is a 3-phase process. The reason we do this is just to get you up and running as quickly as possible. So what we do first is we'll gather any documentation around your existing VDI environments if you have one. And then gather application prerequisites. And what we mean by application is along the lines of what do you need running on these workspaces in terms of Office 365 or custom apps or access to this, access to another custom application, something along those lines. And then ensure the deployment readiness. So just make sure we're in a position where we're ready to deploy these workspaces, given what we have. And then we'll move into a configuration step, which is just us getting into the AWS console, configuring your workspaces components on AWS, configuring any baseline infrastructure you might need to run workspaces, so things like network, IAM, things of that nature. And then we'll get into spinning up actual workspaces. So we'll create a host pool with up to about 10 instances as a test. And then we'll have your team get ready on testing while we actually set each user up individually, after which the project's completed, the pilot's done, and we'll provide you a run book and a knowledge transfer on how to, 1, scale up additional workspaces, 2, configure additional applications, and 3, if you'd like, we can move into a PCR or a future request where we would actually configure custom images for you. We can also have a selection, which is keeping the environment in production, or we can move it back to development, and that is just handled by whether you want the instances running or not. So that's just an auto scaling setting. If you need any customizations in terms of your workspaces image, that could be handled, and obviously Phil's email's there, so reach out to Phil if you'd like us to do that for you.
Awesome. Thank you. And so I'm going to pass it over to Phil to go over the questions that were submitted.
Awesome. Thanks, Larissa. So we do have a few questions that came in, so I'm just going to dive into them. If you have any questions that come up, please enter them into the Q&A and we will get to them. And as mentioned, if there's any questions that come up after the presentation, please email myself and I can get those answered for you and connect you with your sales rep from CDW. So the first question, does this work smoothly and is it an easy transition?
Yeah, it does. The round trip latency using workspaces is quite low, so it's pretty smooth. That said, it is also an easy transition. It really depends on what you're coming from. If this is your first environment, the barrier to entry is very low because there's not really any requirements in terms of existing infrastructure. We can build this from scratch. If you do have existing VDI, then the barrier to entry might be a little bit higher, as in you'd have to start from scratch because you can't migrate existing VDI images into workspaces. So we would just have to build you a new workspaces image. But otherwise, yeah, it's quite simple.
Okay, so that kind of leads into our next question of, can we load our own corporate image into workspaces?
You can, you would just have to build it from scratch in workspaces. So you couldn't build an image locally and then load it into workspaces. You could use the workspaces application manager to build yourself an image and then deploy that image. And that could be managed as a corporate image.
Okay. Next question. How do you monitor associate productivity with this work from home program?
I suppose there might need to be a little bit of clarity around productivity as a term, but I would say you can monitor when someone's online and when they're not. And you can monitor what their runtime was and when they turned on and off the box. So if we're looking just for purely users actually accessing the environment, that could be done via the AWS portal. If you're looking for actual tracking on what they're doing on the workstations or applications they might be accessing, that would need whatever tool you're using right now installed on the workspace, as well as whatever else they need to access. So if you're using a tool that monitors their actual activity, you would just configure it in Workspaces Application Manager, and then when the workspace comes online, it'll be installed.
Okay. So our next question is, why would I choose AWS over Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop?
I think that's an open debate, right? I think if you're not already in the Microsoft ecosystem, it's a pretty easy decision. Also, the barrier to entry is much lower. So if you need to have things up and running in a quicker fashion and don't want to meet the prerequisite hoops that are met with WVD, AWS WorkSpaces is a great option. They're both valid. It just depends on the use case, right?
Awesome. And then this looks like our final question. Approximately what's the cost per user / node to scale up as needed?
It depends on the class of node you go for. I can pull up pricing really quickly for you. There are lots of classes of instances you can spin up, so it'll vary. Do you have a specific like CPU memory count you could throw at me, and I could probably give you a price around that one?
They didn't ask any specific questions on that, just a cost per user, I guess.
Sure. So it can be as low as, $20 a month per user for one CPU, 2 gigs of memory. And then the recommended one I would go for, which is performance, is $41 a month per user. These are in USD, by the way. for 2 CPU, 8 gig of memory, and then you could even go up to doing things such as video graphics enabled workspaces or very large workstations. So 8 CPU, 32 gigs of memory, which are around $123 a month.
Awesome. So that was the end of our questions. So I will give everybody back some time in their day. So I do want to thank everybody for joining. Please reach out to your CDW account executive or account manager. If you're unsure of who that is, you can reach out to myself at phil.clowater, CLOWATER, at cdw.ca, and I will connect you with the appropriate team member to schedule a technical deep dive or answer any questions. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining today.